Okay. All right. Are we ready to move on to the white Lennert?
Yeah, or maybe Jeff, as we're tasting reds, why won't we do like the Burgundy where we finish with the whites? We move to the red CDP.
I've
You don't
always
mind?
thought that you were a Burgundian living in Chateauneuf because I know your affinity for Burgundy. An Alsatian, a Burgundian from Alsace living in Chateauneuf.
Exactly. Having made wine in Chile, but that's another story. Right.
So we're going back to where you were yesterday, back to Chateauneuf. A place
Yes.
that I was lucky enough to visit a couple years ago, I guess now. So why don't you tell me a little bit about, the long history of Chateau Lannert?
Yes, indeed. Very much like the property where I'm at right now. Chateau Lannert is one of the oldest property in the region. The first written record of Chateau Lannert is from 1560. We don't know exactly when the estate was founded, but this is the first written record. That's when it changed hands. And we know that the cellar was already in existence at that moment. So, we've been making wine at Chateau Lannert for at least 500 years.
And I guess many people know the story of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, the 13 varieties that are able to be put into the wine. And I believe all 13 are grown there at Lannert, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, yes. We are one of the very few estates still today growing and fermenting, and in many cases co-fermenting the 13 grapes.
But this is, again, predominantly Grenache, is that right?
So the blend tends to change year by year because of the last, if I look at the last decade, we've seen some significant change on how each of the individual grape has reacted to the climate change. And the yields have been up and down depending on the vintage. But yes, I would say the benchmark blend for our flagship wine, which is Chateau Lannert Red, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, is around 50% Grenache, so around half Grenache. And then we have quite a high proportion of Syrah, year in, year out, around 30%. And then Mourvèdre. We have one of the largest, if not the largest, single plot of Mourvèdre. We have a 7-hectare single plot of Mourvèdre planted on clay. And then we have a bit of all the other 10 grapes. I would say from the other 10, there are only 2 that have very specific single plots dedicated to them. It's Cinsault, again, and another grape which is much less known, which is Counoise. And of course, you have some whites vines dotted around the red plots.
And do any of those
so this is a blend.
Do any of the whites ever make it into the blend for the red?
Always. And so, for example, we have a few vines of Clairette on Lacroix. So on the highest part, which is Pebblestone, we have some 90-year-old Clairette that are dotted around Grenache. Why or how is difficult to know because we don't have records about what happened 90 years ago in detail when they replanted that particular plot. But it's very interesting. And of course, it's very much what happens in Côte-Rôtie, where you co-ferment some Viognier with Syrah. It's the same for us. For example, in 2016, it was such a warm vintage. We decided to co-ferment all the Bourboulinque, which is one of our red grape. We co-fermented it completely with red Grenache to bring some acidity and freshness.
Because the heat, the Grenache is perhaps a little bit overripe or a little low in acidity because of the heat.
Exactly. It's more, the ripeness. It's more about the acidity. Yes.
Right. So what do you? So I know we were talking through email, I think, and you said you had an 81 Chateauneuf last night, or was it 2 nights ago?
That's right. Yeah. as a reward to our little detour on the top of the Mont Ventoux. So yesterday we cycled about 130 kilometers, and we climbed the Géant de Provence, the Mont Ventoux. I don't know if you can see it. Actually, it's in the distance there.
Yeah,
all the way.
right there, right just to the left of those trees.
That's right. That's right. So anyway, this is the highest standalone mountain in France, and it's the highest point of Provence. But back to your question, as a reward, we decided to, we thought we deserved to open a very, very special bottle. And 1981 was amazing. It's a very underrated vintage, not as famous as 79 or 82, but it was absolutely amazing. And back to your first comments about my personal taste, as well as some of the comments around Chateau La Nerthe, is one of the I think very nice thing that our good old friend Mr. Robert Parker wrote about us when he was still coming to Chateau La Nerthe at the end of August every year. He said that Chateau La Nerthe is the most Burgundian of the Châteauneuf du Pape. And when you tasted this 1981, I think it was a testimony to that. What made this wine so special was the finesse of the tannins, a delicacy. It was velvety, and of course, it had lost a bit of the power that you find is in this young vintage, but it gained a lot in terms of the finesse of the tannins, the delicacy of the mouthfeel. It was just singing in the glass.
No, and I obviously haven't tasted as many La Nerthes as you have, but I've noticed that about the tannins, that almost every La Nerthe that I've had, I'm trying to think if there's an exception to this, but right out of the bottle, they're very drinkable. Whereas some Chateauneufs, you need to lay down for 5-10 years at a minimum, just so that those tannins can soften up a bit, because they can be quite harsh, particularly on the back end, a little even bitter. But La Nerthe,
that's right.
The tannins are always very supple. Still great aging potential, but not aggressive like some Chateauneufs that I've had.
I think it's a testimony to the fantastic terroir of Chateau La Nerthe. Because Chateau La Nerthe, we talked about it, is one of the oldest, if not the oldest property in Châteauneuf du Pape. So we've been making wine for a very long time there. We also have this a bit unusual grape composition that we described. We have quite a high proportion of Syrah and Mourvèdre, much more than the rest of the village. And the reason for that is that we have a natural freshness in the terroir. The reason the chateau was implemented there is we have a natural spring on the property, and which means that the water table is quite close to the ground, particularly on all the plots where we have the white grapes, as well as Syrah and Mourvèdre. So I think this contributes greatly to the finesse and the elegance that you kindly mentioned, Jeff.
No, I'm just tasting this. I mean, there's absolutely fantastic fruit, both on the nose and on the palate, but also that spiciness. And after about my third little sip, I started to get a little bit of that tannin on the back end, saying that this still has a long way to go. I don't think that, I mean, it's a 2016, but gosh, I think 10 years without a problem, probably more.
For sure.
Yeah, it's just.
And I would definitely pass it through carafe if I were to. Actually, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to refresh it a little bit and pass it through carafe before drinking it with my friend here from the Prieuré de Montézac when they finish pressing the harvest of the day.
No, it's really fantastic.